I think it's in the 1980s, maybe it was 1980 itself, the philosopher John Searle steps into the debate regarding artificial intelligence, and in particular poses a challenge to the Turing test. And he says, okay, you're saying that if I'm unable to differentiate the output of a human mind in the form of the thoughts it produces and the output of artificial intelligence or a thinking machine, that I then am compelled to regard those different outputs as essentially the same thing. That human thoughts and the output of a computer are in essence the same thing, and that artificial intelligence is a distinction without a difference. And Searle says, I think you've got this wrong. I think you're confusing something. And in particular, what Searle says is that simulating cognitive processes is not the same thing as experiencing them. And in particular, what Searle is focused on here is this concept of intentionality. Intentionality is a feature of certain mental states, such as beliefs or thoughts, by which they are directed at or are about objects or states of affairs in the world. In other words, I'm producing thoughts right now that are manifesting in the things I'm saying to you. And this, of course, is the output of my consciousness, my rationality, my functionality, the functionality of my brain. And these thoughts that I'm having and that I'm expressing and sharing with you, they're not thoughts about what's happening in my brain currently, right? There are things happening in my neurons, in my brain right now. Certain parts of it are lighting up that are associated with the things that I'm sharing with you. And I have a conscious experience not of those particular things happening in my brain, but on ideas about things, about you, about this computer, about my job, about the state of affairs that I exist in, and what it is that I need to do to accomplish my goals. And what Searle's saying is, that's the essence of intelligence. It's not the output, it's the experience that generates the output. And to illustrate his argument, Searle proposes what is termed the Chinese room thought experiment. And I'm going to give you a super reduced description of this, so just kind of just know you're getting a truncated version. And Searle says essentially this. Imagine you're in a room all by yourself, and there's a computer that's been programmed in Chinese. So somebody in another room can type in commands in Chinese on another computer that's been programmed in Chinese, send those messages in Chinese into your room on the screen, and you're sitting there looking at this screen of Chinese characters and have no idea what they mean. But you have this ledger, and this ledger says, when these characters pop up on the screen, go into this filing cabinet and grab these pages that also have Chinese characters that are responding to this command on the screen. And then you deliver that those papers that you've gotten out of the filing cabinet, and you slide them under the door, or you put them in this little chute here, and the person who typed in the original Chinese commands is going to get the appropriate response. And Searle says, well, this would seem to pass the Turing test. After all, that person sitting in the other room typing commands in Chinese on a computer is getting the response that would be expected given what was typed in. So that must mean that the output that this human being created is the same thing as the input the Chinese speaker put into the computer. And Searle's saying, but this person doesn't have any understanding of what he's actually been commanded to do. He just has this book that translates for him. When you see this, pick up that piece of paper. There's no understanding there. Therefore, there's a qualitative difference between understanding an idea that occurs to you as a belief or a thought and simply translating mechanically and producing an output that's expected. Okay? So this raises the question for us. What exactly is a thought? There are a few questions that I pose in my intro to philosophy class that stumps students more than this. What is a thought? Maybe even pause your video and think about that for a moment. Okay, I'm going to suggest to you that a more simplified version of what Searle's saying is this, is that a thought is a mental event. It's not a physical event. You don't experience any physical sensations in your brain when you're having a thought about something. Instead, you're experiencing this mental event about something. It's a mental event of about something. And so what Searle says is, when you see these 4 ampersands and equal signs and 4 pound signs, is that meaningful to you? We'd say like, well, I know how an ampersand or an equal sign or pound signs are used, but I don't understand what they mean when they're put in this particular combination. And Searle says, yeah. And so if I gave you a translating book and said, well, when you see these 4 ampersands, you're supposed to produce this response. When you see an equal sign, you're supposed to produce this response. And when you see the 4 pound signs, you produce this response. You'd say, well, great, I still don't understand what these things actually mean. And Searle says, exactly. But now think about this, a picture of a cute dog. Do you understand that? Did the image of a dog just pop into your mind? Because Searle's going to say, now that is important, that you had a thought that was an experience. It was a mental experience, and it was about the world. It was about something. In other words, you understood the meaning of the sentence, a picture of a cute dog. And so Searle goes further and say, yeah, this whole conflating of simulation versus things that are real is a real mistake. I don't get wet in a simulated rainstorm. When I'm walking around in a video game universe and it's raining, I'm not getting wet. I don't get burned in a simulated fire. I can recognize the difference between a flight simulator and a real plane. These things are not the same. And that's exactly what Searle's arguing, is that simulated thought is not evidence of thinking. It's just a simulation of something. But of course, we have others like the late, great Daniel Dennett, another philosopher, who's going to say like, all right, fair point. But is simulation always different from the real thing? And so Dennett says, if a computer simulation of a mathematician produces proofs, are those proofs real proofs or mere representations of proof? If artificial light is still light, then isn't artificial intelligence still intelligence? Okay, so you might think about where you come down on this. What exactly is the nature of a thought, and is it something that a machine could ever do?